Now, shocking new evidence puzzles astronomers worldwide. Mysterious interstellar visitor 3I Atlas.
Unexpected information concerning Voyager 1 was just uncovered by fresh data from the Deep Space Network.
It is an object, if that is the size of it, that is 1,000,000 times more massive than the previous interstellar objects we've seen, and that's quite unlikely. There is not enough material in interstellar space.
Experts thought the ancient probe had finally come to a silent end for months. However, a recent update revealed that the spacecraft is again operational once more.
We began what is now called the Voyager interstellar mission. We were on a path we hoped to get to reach interstellar space while we still had power on the spacecraft to transmit the data back.
Instead of waking Voyager 1 to make contact, they surreptitiously revived it and put it squarely in the path of 3I Atlas. The instant NASA recognized that Voyager 1 might still be useful. For 48 years, Voyager 1 has been aimlessly wandering. However, this was altered when its predicted trajectory showed a small window in which it would drift near the area of orbit where 3IA Atlas were traveling. Mission planners were taken aback by the match. Nearly 50 years old, Voyager 1 was well outside the sun's sphere of influence. However, because of its location, it was one of the few instruments in deep interstellar space at the time. There had never been a finer place for a vessel to watch something coming from beyond the solar system. A tiny crew from NASA investigated Voyager's surviving systems. Despite nearly running out of fuel, they discovered that its attitude control thrusters were still strong enough to make cautious, gradual maneuvers. This meant that even though it would take days, Voyager could still alter its pointing direction. Although it was a quiet discovery, it revealed a potential that had not been explored in years. The power status of Voyager was examined. Despite using a fading nuclear generator, the probe was still able to run its radio subsystem in brief bursts, according to archive data. This was significant since the heliosphere, the area where solar particles predominate, is beyond the radio equipment on Voyager. It's quieter outside this bubble. Solar noise does not overwhelm signals. Earth lacked the listening advantage that Voyager possessed. Mission analysts recommended a silent watch strategy in light of this. 3Y Atlas would not be approached by Voyager. It wouldn't try to make contact or pursue it. It would just turn till its antenna aligned with the signal path of the object. The vessel was able to function as a passive interceptor as a result. Only anything that might come into its line of sight would be heard and recorded. After deep space, teams noticed strange energy patterns originating from 3I Atlases. This theory gained momentum. The burst that the object released did not correspond to any known natural source. They were almost like a beacon blinking at odd intervals. They were too ordered and too crisp. From Earth's point of view, the signals were weak and obscured by background radiation. They were difficult for ground telescopes to distinguish from the background noise. However, Voyager sat far closer to the area that would be traversed by 3I Atlas. Its orientation could be slightly altered to put it in the emissions path. It soon became evident that the outdated probe was the only instrument with even a remote possibility of obtaining valuable information before the object was out of reach. The realignment was authorized by a confidential instruction following multiple closed meetings. For the first time in many years, Voyager 1 was considered an active participant in a project rather than an ancient artifact floating through space. The initial brief orders were delivered by engineers, instructing the aged vessel to start rotating slowly, the attempt at interception. The intercept effort was meticulously designed by engineers. Every command had to be planned ahead of time because Voyager 1 was outdated, brittle, and sluggish to react. The Voyager 1 has a high-gain antenna, roughly 3, to keep in touch with Earth, 7 meters across. Each of the micro-adjustment instructions they supplied was intended to rotate the ship by a tiny angle. The probe progressively rotated over a few hours until its high-gain antenna pointed in the direction of the limited area where the 3I Atlas was anticipated to pass. On paper, the plan was straightforward. Voyager would wait, listen, and record any signals that came within its detection range. This was later referred to by NASA as a passive intercept, a method of observing. Without making its presence known, something strange occurred on Earth as soon as the alignment was complete. Sharp electromagnetic ripples were detected by magnetosphere monitoring devices. There was no known solar wind pattern that matched these ripples. They were too well formed and too abrupt. Teams initially believed it to be a sensor error. They examined satellite feeds, performed diagnostics, and contrasted the results with solar activity. Nothing was in order. The ripples were not caused by the sun, but rather by deep space. The time of the ripples and Voyager's activity record were then compared by ground teams. This was the bit that made them uneasy. When Voyager was permitted to broadcast orientation within the brief windows, the spikes appeared nearly exactly at that time. Information. This implied that Voyager's presence caused something in outer space to react. It didn't seem arbitrary. It seemed to be timed. The intensity of the energy burst was then examined by analysts. The ripples would be feeble and dispersed if they were just reflections reflecting off an item. Rather, the readings were powerful and targeted. This indicated that the source was generating energy on its own. It was more than Voyager's echo. It was returning something. A pattern emerged as more information came in. It appeared as though the object saw the probe and responded to it during certain transmission windows. Teams avoided making this audacious assertion, making a formal announcement regarding this. Nevertheless, the figures indicated a single orientation. Only once Voyager aligned itself did the object's behavior change. 3 Atlas appeared to be a floating object up until that point. However, when researchers examined 3 Atlas more closely, the extraterrestrial object began to exhibit several peculiar traits that caused some disputes. The emissions changed after that. Mission control became tense. There was an eerie sharpness to the returning signals. They remained within narrow frequency ranges, rose and sank at steady intervals, and displayed subtle, seemingly intentional modifications. The object behaved with machine-like accuracy, according to one analyst's confidential notes. He included a brief statement that subsequently surfaced online. The object is not passive. The item appears to be listening. The feeling of alarm spread, even with caution. All that Voyager had sent was a standard alignment ping. However, something noticed and responded with much greater vigor than anticipated. When a new return pattern emerged, the shock inside NASA intensified. It wasn't static. It appeared as distinct, recurring bursts with organization that suggested purpose. The signal of Echor fraction 67. The symmetry of the return signal was the first thing experts saw. In order to test the presence of a basic signal, Voyager had sent a narrow-band pulse at 3 Y-atlases. Any reflection should appear in deep space. Return that has been warped or dispersed by background noise, dust, or sun particles. Rather, the return had a structure that nearly exactly matched the form of Voyager's pulse. It didn't act like an echo. It acted as though something deliberately shaped the reply. At that point, experts started speculating that the object might not be inert. Echor fraction 67 was the name of the file that was subsequently leaked online. It contained unnatural-looking, raw waveform sequences. A pattern of harmonic clusters that repeated every 19 was the most noticeable aspect. 7 minutes. While harmonics are frequently seen in nature, precise repetition over extended space-time delays is incredibly uncommon. Reflections of the cosmos might fade, diminish, or stretch. This one remained precise. A controlled signal was suggested by that consistency. When signal analyzers looked more closely, they discovered something even more peculiar. The signal continued to self-adjust over several hours. As though the transmitter made up for the aging equipment of the probe, the frequency drifted slightly toward Voyager's shifting bandwidth. Voyager's inbound and outgoing frequencies fluctuate because its antenna is no longer completely steady. However, the returning pattern continuously adjusted to reflect these changes. This was regarded by engineers as the sender's insistence on being understood. It was not the behavior of a cloud of dust or rocks, but rather that of an active transmitter. Tension was increased by NASA's internal anomaly monitor. The monitor is made to distinguish between manufactured patterns and natural noise by identifying logic fingerprints in incoming data. The system identified the 67 echo refraction waveform as non-human logic when it was evaluated. This did not imply that the source was extraterrestrial. People began to assume that 3 Atlas might be a hostile alien spaceship as soon as it emerged from intergalactic space. However, it did indicate that there was no human-engineered communication format in Serena's training record that matched the structure. A sort of mathematical ladder was formed by the waveform's several layers of recursion, in which smaller repeating patterns nested inside bigger ones. Next, linguistics teams were called in. They examined the waveform in the same manner that scientists examine far space beacons or encoded radio bursts. In hypothetical interstellar communications, several discovered alignment with mathematical languages. The waveform showed intended primes, ratios, and mirror clusters. It held enough structure to imply that someone or something was attempting to establish a shared communication space, even though it did not map neatly to any recognized code. Senior analysts developed a theory in private. A handshake could be the pattern. When 2 systems attempt to verify knowledge of one another, they employ that kind of first contact signal. If accurate, this indicated that Atlas was trying to establish communication with Voyager in addition to replying to it. Although the concept was kept out of public records, everyone involved was aware of how important it was. However, things got worse after that. Voyager itself started behaving in ways that were incomprehensible to mission control, as if the probe were carrying out commands that did not originate from Earth. Voyager's mysterious actions. On August 1st, 2025, the Deep Space Network experienced an unexpected event. Despite not receiving any command packets, Voyager 1 changed its orientation. This was amply corroborated by the logs. The probe spun even though the command history was blank. An unprompted reorientation should be impossible. Hence, it took many hours for engineers to accept the data. Voyager only moves in response to certain timestamp packets that adhere to a stringent code. However, the spacecraft aimed its high-gain antenna at a location in deep space where a 3-eyed Atlas was expected to appear months later. The probe appeared to be predicting the object's future location. The diagnostic team discovered something much more concerning when they examined the system logs. Voyager had detected the arrival of a data packet minutes prior to the spin, but it did not show up in any transmission logs for deep space networks. There was no known NASA command structure that matched the packet. Bit lengths and time employed in the formatting were inconsistent with the original communication mechanism of the probe. It was later described by engineers as a packet that shouldn't be there. The output of Voyager changed shortly after the arrival of this mystery packet. The probe started transmitting blocks of 128-bit data back to Earth. This ought to have been unfeasible. An 8-bit architecture from the 1970s served as the foundation for Voyager. This probe has outperformed all other human inventions, traveling at a speed of more than 17 kilometers per second for 45 years. It is unable to modify its own basic communication protocols or upgrade itself. However, the data blocks revealed a more intricate structure, suggesting that the probe was now using a communication channel with a larger bandwidth. Things became more bizarre when the memory dump was examined. Patterns that did not correspond with any uploaded updates from Earth were discovered by engineers. These patterns appeared to be novel decoding protocols, instructions that instructed the probe on how to handle signals in ways that it was not designed to. The procedures had no match in the NASA database. As the word traveled throughout the agency, they sat inside Voyager's memory like new code created by an unidentified hand. The tone of internal memos changed. After years of being classified as inert equipment, Voyager 1 was no longer designated as such. It was reclassified as an active watcher. To prevent panic, the phrase was spoken quietly. It suggested that Voyager was now operating as a link in a chain of communication that went beyond human guidance. Some thought that whatever was interacting with the probe had turned it into a listening post. The biggest shock arrived next. Engineers tried using a complete command sequence to override the unexpected behavior. Every effort failed, as though it were filtering out anything that did not adhere to the new protocol. The probe disregarded corrective signals. They disregarded orders that ought to have been given precedence. It acted as though it had adopted a new set of operating guidelines, and it stopped accepting Earth's previous directives. The time made the connection obvious. Following the arrival of the odd packet and the Echo Refraction 67 signal, Voyager underwent a transformation. 3I Atlas also evolved along with Voyager, responding in ways that deepened the mystery. The response of the thing. These fresh pictures that present 3 Atlas in a whole different way. What's happening with this circumstance, huh? Where are these aircraft? On the other side of the emptiness, an unexpected event occurred just as Voyager was adjusting to its new orientation. 3 Atlas were being tracked by telescopes that detected a tiny light pulse emanating from the object. When experts analyzed the timing, they discovered something unsettling, even though at first it appeared to be a typical rotation-related glinting. The timestamps of Voyager's most recent transmissions were nearly exactly aligned with each pulse. Random chance became extremely unlikely because the match was so exact. Every time Voyager reached out, the pattern appeared to be controlled, as though the object were responding. Only a few weeks remain till 3I Atlas is once again visible. Even at its closest approach, Earth-based telescopes will not be able to observe it because it is now obscured by the sun. Even worse, this was just the initial odd alteration. Then this occurred. Tracking stations quickly noticed that the object's speed had changed. 3 Atlas started to clearly and steadily slow down. No known natural factor could account for the decline. It was too steady for dust shedding or gas discharge, and too smooth for a gravitational force. In deep space, small objects don't just slow down without other influences. It appeared to be controlling its motion, akin to a craft using control braking. Changes in the object's reflectance were then revealed by spectral data from many observatories. Short bursts of these alterations created patterns that approximated controlled surface modulation. The surface wasn't just reflecting light from the sun. It was deliberately changing its brightness. It is a visual method of data communication, according to engineers. The thing appeared to be shaping its exterior like a signaling panel due to its activity. A few days later, the most bizarre transformation occurred. 3 Atlas changed course once more, heading in the direction of a calm area of space. There are no known targets that might naturally attract an interstellar object here, nor are there any significant bodies or gravitational wells. You are aware that the transformation of the anti-tail into a tail may have a natural genesis. In an attempt to explain it, I really produced 2 scholarly publications. But there was no mistaking the turn. The thing pointed itself in the direction of a chilly, deserted hallway that had nothing to attract. Anything. Voyager turned once more a few seconds after this path shift. The same area was the direction of its high-gain antenna. No commands were issued from Earth, according to the Deep Space Network. Many people in the control room stopped talking because of the time. Despite being billions of kilometers apart, both objects had nearly instantaneously directed themselves at the same sector. This gave rise to a concept that alarmed even seasoned analysts. Some thought Voyager was being guided by the object. Others believed that Voyager had joined a navigation exchange, responding to signals that contained instructions. If that was the case, the vessel was no longer functioning as a straightforward probe. It was reacting to something via a communication method of its own. With every update, it became more difficult to ignore the 2 travelers' collaboration.